So, welcome to another edition of Jewish Book Review. And this month, Babette is going to do it. We were talking before I hit record about wishing a mazel tov to Babette on and Jonathan on their daughter, who is a rabbi now in Corpus Christi, Texas. They had the congregation had the official installation for her this past Shabbat. So mazel tov,
Thank
and
you.
so Babette is going to be talking tonight about the Jonathan Greenblatt book. It Could Happen Here. So I'll let Babette take it away.
This was the book that we had copies of it in the synagogue. I hope everybody was able to get one or read it in some other way. Jonathan Greenblatt is the CEO of the Anti-Defamation League, and he has been a leader with them for almost, uh, I guess it's 10 years now. So the book is his thesis is that yes, these awful things have happened around the country, and he lays out a list of things that have happened, both anti-Semitic related and other kinds of attacks on groups. And his thesis is that if we take action, we can negate the effects of this in our own lives. If we take action as individuals, and the Anti-Defamation League has a lot of tools and resources, and I'll also share with you, I found out about some local resources we have here too. Um, so I want to start, I hope people are willing to participate with some questions for discussion. So feel free to not be muted for that. Uh, so I'm going to start just right off the bat with the book is titled It Could Happen Here: Why America is Tipping from Hate to the Unthinkable and How We Can Stop It. So, thinking about that title, just write what are your thoughts about the meaning of that title? And we should start with the fact that this book was published in 2022. So it was long before October 7th, 2023. So he wrote this without any newly, the rise in anti Semitism since October 7th. Um, Anybody have thoughts about the meaning of the title of the book? Nobody? Um, do you have an idea of where do you think we are on the tipping point of hate and why? Okay. So I want people to keep in mind hate today isn't just about anti-Semitism. We are the canary in the coal mine, as Greenblatt put it, and hatred often starts with Jews but doesn't end there. All kinds of hatred has exploded in recent years, including racism, anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim bias, homophobia, anti-immigrant bias, and more. And if you read the book, you also know that at the time of the writing, Greenblatt also brought to the forefront the hate that was going on with the Asian American population because of the pandemic after COVID. Anybody have an idea of what's fueling the hate that's been going on across different groups? Okay, factors, what he points out, factors fueling the hate are embolden extremism with white supremacists, like we saw in Charlottesville in 2017 during Trump's first administration. Um, the dehumanization of immigrants, and there's, here we are again in 2025 with a second Trump administration. It's not going to end right now. Uh, Spread of neo-Nazi conspiracy theories like QAnon, heightened political rhetoric and political divide. Of course, we saw the January 6th insurrection, and mainstreaming of hate that helped create that. Um, the economy, we'll see if anything changes, if any of these economic issues improve with the new administration. Um, Social media has an effect with disinformation and the propaganda of these organizations. And the anti-Asian attacks, like I said before, were caused by the pandemic. And there is still things going on with that every time COVID is mentioned. Barbara, did you have something you wanted to say? See you unmuted.
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay. Okay. So I want to share, he focused on something called the Pyramid of Hate. You can just get that screen up. Okay.
We will use the pyramid.
Okay. All right. Can you see the screen with the pyramid?
I can't read the pyramids.
I'm going to read it to you. Okay. All right. So the Pyramid of Hate, that he mentions is a visual example of how hate can escalate from thoughts to words to acts of violence. At the very bottom, we have biased attitudes. Then it goes to acts of bias, to systemic discrimination, to bias motivated violence. Okay. So under biased attitudes, we have stereotyping, fear of differences, justifying biases by seeking out like-minded people. So if everybody has biases of some kind, and you may find that you actually actively seek out people who agree with those biases. Doesn't mean that they're bad biases, just means that everybody has biases. Seeking out, and there's lack of self-reflection or awareness of privilege very, very often in those biased attitudes. The next level, acts of bias, would include things like non-inclusive language and insensitive remarks. Leading from that is systemic discrimination, which would be things like inequitable school resources, housing segregation, inequitable employment opportunities for people, and wage disparities. Voter restrictions and suppression, like we saw not too long ago in Georgia, would be another example of that. Unequal media representation. We often see that in American media when it comes to Israel. We have seen media bias in American media. Then that can lead to bias motivated violence. Things like threats, desecration, vandalism, rape, murder, and terrorism. And then the unthinkable is at the top of the pyramid, which is genocide. So my question is, do you see how hate can grow from the most basic biased attitudes all the way up to bias motivated violence and beyond?
It's always there. It's just a matter of whether they feel you could get away with it or not.
Can you be more specific? Get away with what?
Well, you have what's considered the correct thing to say and the correct way to behave. You still may have this hatred of other people, and then it goes down and at times it's just not cool to do it. But then as you get permission to do it, when you have a rally and you allow leaders of the fringe groups to come in, and that's okay, then it gives other people to say, okay, if they can, so can I.
So, right, good. So you're talking about how biased attitudes become acts of bias then, how they're given a platform, kind of is what you're saying.
They're given permission to behave in that uh, behave in that direction.
Right. So to what, how can we stop biased attitudes from escalating to acts of bias?
It depends on your leaders.
Right. So
I mean, you know,
can we get
we
more
had like,
at a more microscopic level, can we stop it before it gets to that level?
it has to be from the top down, in my opinion.
Okay. Charlotte, is there anything you want to add? Okay. Um, so one of the points that Greenblatt makes related to add to what you said, Barbara, is when we challenge those biased attitudes and behaviors in ourselves, others, and institutions, we can interrupt the escalation of bias and make it more difficult for discrimination and hate to flourish. So if it starts, everything starts with us, is what he's saying, in other words, too. So we do our best that we can when we vote, for example, um, because maybe we don't want those kind of leaders, and we can only do our part as much as we can. But that's an example of that. Thank you for sharing those ideas. So I want to, sorry, I have a lot of questions. I want to move on to the idea of what we can do. I'm going to stop my share. He references a framework what ADL promotes to help individuals find their voices and respond to hate. And it's 3 S's: speak up, share facts, show strength. So, as an individual, what does that framework mean to you?
It sounds good.
It sounds good. Have you ever, um, so you don't like it? You don't like the idea of it? Or do you?
Well, it's still it comes uh being a lone voice uh doesn't go anywhere.
Have you ever spoken up, shared facts, and shown strength to help in a situation?
No,
No. Do you think,
I've gone to demonstrations and been one of the many, but not as for me, that's not me.
but see what you just said, you did help when you did that, when you went to a demonstration.
Well, well, okay, but you asked, did I ever speak up? Going,
But you did at a demonstration.
yeah, well, that's okay. So I went to demonstrations, but that's
Well, you should give yourself credit for that because that is taking part and speaking up and showing strength when you do that. Anyway, um, so that's a great personal example. Um, And have you ever had a conversation with somebody that you kind of corrected them with facts that you knew? That's another way that we can help.
I don't argue with people that refuse to listen, and say I will walk away.
Okay.
There are other people that find talking easier. I don't.
Charlotte, do you have anything you want to add? Okay. And the towards the end of the book, in the epilogue, Greenblatt references the book of Exodus when God calls out to Moses, and Moses replies, Hineni, here I am. How do you think this connects back to the calls to action in the book?
Don't know.
Did you read the book?
No.
Oh, well, I understand now. Um, it's helpful when for a book discussion anyway. Okay. Um, so I suggest that you do read the book. I think you'd get a lot out of it. It was very well, it's very easy read. Um, he makes a good argument on how individuals can help. It's a call to duty. He references here I am because when we're asked to speak up and relate to people and want in situations without fighting back, without yelling, but with having conversations and try and he gives examples in the book of people he spoke to that have been corrected their ways. And part of what they did was work that they did was to meet with him later on from his position as CEO of ADL. And he shares about those conversations and how he believes that these people now are like, there was one example he gave of somebody who used to be a white supremacist, who was a kid who just had a terrible life as a kid and got sucked in as an older teen, and actually was a Jewish kid, and wound up now as an adult having a being a much more serious guy, and he's had to deal with a lot to get past what he did as a kid. Um, but he turned his life around. Um, and so the idea of Hineni here is that we can take steps as individuals and create a different situation for people too, and in our own lives. And that while we might think we're powerless against the forces of hate, we're not. That it starts with the idea of, like Moses, showing up and saying, Here I am, when we're called to action. So it's hard to talk about much else if you haven't read the book. I invite you to read it. Uh, and
Does
yeah,
it come in audio?
it does. I actually listened to it. It does come in audio. So it's about 8 hours on audio, unabridged. So it's not a very long book. But he makes a very good argument for how people can make a difference. And especially now reading this, I felt like it's even more important for us to step all as members of our community to step up whenever we can, however we can, with what's going on again in this country. So, especially seeing what's been going on already the past couple of days. But that's me. Anyway.
I mean, all I have done is when I speak with my non-Jewish friends or people that I come in contact with, I will talk about what the Jewish position is.
Mhm.
And so far, the people who I've met with uh, do not argue with me or try to say something else.
So that's great. So you see you're teaching them.
Well, I don't know if I'm teaching them or that if we have to work together, it's better to if I'm a client, well, I'm not going to upset my client or I don't know.
Okay, fair enough. But I think one of his points is that people should come. We don't need to come from a place. People, even if people have some inherent biases, it doesn't mean that they're going to come from a place of hatred.
Well, I think most people do not come from uh, a place of hatred. I think many people will um, go with go with the flow. Um, and the climate is such that the water is not going in the right direction.
Right. So,
And
and
uh, when you have even when the president starts commuting people that have tried to overthrow the government, hey, you could do anything now,
mhm.
and it's encouraging more. Uh, and it doesn't take a whole lot of people to uh, put the things in disarray.
Right, but it's up to us to not give up and just not accept it. Do whatever we can. Anyway, on that note, okay, I'm gonna say Lila Tov.
What? Good evening, Lila Tove.
Lila Tov.